Hello again and welcome. My name is Doug Davidoff. I am the founder and CEO at Imagine Business Development. I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day today. I know how busy things are. I know it's crazy, and I don't know where you are, but I am on the East Coast in the Mid-Atlantic, and I got to tell you, it's 74 degrees and sunny, and it's February 21st. So I appreciate anybody that's enjoying weather like this to take the time out of their day. To sit in and listen to what is a increasingly important topic for growth companies. And of course, for those of you listening on recording, thank you for joining us as well. One of the biggest challenges when it comes to growing a company is managing the complexity that arises from growth. The need to hire more salespeople, bring on more marketers, competition gets more intense, customers become more demanding. The challenge of managing all that is one of the key reasons that companies' growth stalls, costs go up, and the challenges get bigger and bigger. One of the things you're going to find is the companies that really accelerate growth through what are often called consolidation periods. Those who move through those ceilings of complexities do that because one of the things they spent a significant amount of time developing that most companies pay little or no attention to is the development of their playbook. Now, playbooks apply to all aspects of business and certainly all aspects of demand generation. So there's marketing playbooks, lead generation playbooks, customer success playbooks, sales development playbooks. Today, we're going to focus on the sales playbook. We're going to focus on the sales part of it, that aspect that is ultimately responsible for bringing new customers into the business. And from the research that we've done, we've developed tens of playbooks for companies. We've studied hundreds. And what we found is, while every playbook is a little bit different, and certainly your playbook should be built for you, there are 7 components that are present in every effective sales playbook. And not only are they present in every effective sales playbook, when you look at sales playbooks that don't drive the types of results that I'm going to be talking about, one or more of these components are missing. So let's jump in. Let's talk about why sales playbooks are so important. What is it that we need sales playbooks for? Or as I like to talk about it, what is it that sales playbooks solve for? So one of the first things they do is they really help you ramp up salespeople faster, or if you're involved in different types of acquisitions or things like that, to integrate new sales reps into your organization faster. A caveat of that, or I should say a corollary of that, is they also make it easier to hire salespeople. They broaden the talent pool for those that can be successful. So they actually decrease the mishire rate. The second thing sales playbooks solve for are higher revenue quotas and revenue attainment. Companies with good, strong strategic playbooks have higher attainments of quota, and quotas are at higher rates. They see lower customer acquisition costs. They experience shorter sales cycles, greater revenue velocity. And what's interesting, and the reason it's interesting is because oftentimes when we talk about things like playbooks, which quickly connect to process, people oftentimes think of process as making them more rigid or making the organization more rigid. And one of the critical components for sales is the ability to be agile, the ability to adjust quickly. Playbooks actually enable you to be more agile. They get everybody on the same page while freeing them to perform in their style, within their personality, and to leverage their unique abilities while staying connected to the customer and keeping everybody aligned. So sales playbooks also drive agility and scalability. Now, don't get me wrong. Doing a playbook doesn't actually do anything. I know you're probably pretty excited. Hey, I took an hour out of my day today to learn about the 7 components of effective playbooks. And the guy who's teaching me that just said, having a playbook doesn't do anything. And that's true. You have to use the playbook. And unfortunately, most playbooks that are developed don't drive these results. So let's look at why sales playbooks fail. Right? Why do companies put the time into developing the playbook and ultimately they don't see the results that they were looking for in developing it? Well, the first reason they fail is too often playbooks are not built for use. They're built to create the feeling of certainty or to satisfy a board or a boss or some reason where they get developed. Too often they get printed out, they get put in a notebook, they get put in a drawer if you're lucky, and they never see the light of day. You've got to be thinking about your playbook from the perspective of designing it for utilization. A playbook is designed to be used. It needs to be applicable. It needs to be helpful. It needs to leverage the efforts of your sales team. The next reason is that the underlying process or design of the playbook is either built on a process that's too rigid and doesn't stand the test of the market, or it's too vague. It's a series of philosophies and ideas, or it's just a random set of workflows that get used by certain people at random times. One of the great mantras any sales organization can chant is solve for the customer, always solve for the customer. And the third reason that playbooks fail is too often they're focused internally. They're designed for efficiency. They make us internally focused and they're not aligned with the customer. Your customer, the person you're trying to attract, needs to be at the center of your playbook. Oftentimes, assumptions go into developing your playbook. And actually, it's not oftentimes, it's always. You're gonna build assumptions. And if you're not using the playbook regularly and you're not iterating the playbook, those false assumptions cause the playbook to be irrelevant. You've always got to be testing your assumptions. And by the way, there are many times that aspects of the playbook were right on, but the world changes and they don't keep up with it. And that leads to the last reason, is they're not built for iteration. They're not designed to be utilized, refreshed, updated. Playbooks should always be working. You should always be working on your playbook. I'll make this clear. We are not fans of printed out playbooks. Printed out playbooks are the fastest way to get them not to be used. It creates all kinds of version control issues. They're very difficult to iterate. There becomes a bureaucracy in managing playbooks. Keep it focused, keep it agile, keep it interactive. We'll talk more about that later. All right, as I shared a moment ago, there are a couple types of playbooks. And one thing I want to get across to anyone that's listening is whether you think you have a playbook or you don't think you have a playbook, you have a playbook. Every company has a playbook. A playbook is the manifestation of the thoughts, actions, and efforts, strategies, and tactics that people take to do their jobs. And so since everybody has that, there's a playbook. The question is the playbook clearly identified? Is the playbook purposeful? And so the biggest challenge, the most common playbook is what we call the no playbook playbook, right? It's not documented, which means it's never the same thing twice. It actually leads to chaos. Different people are playing different ways. You know, imagine if you were on your favorite football team and everybody had their own playbook, their own way to look at things, their own way that they thought of plays. What's the likelihood that you would beat the team that had an aligned playbook? And so make no mistake about it. The question is not, are you going to have a playbook? The question is, are you going to have a documented and purposeful playbook? Now, the step above the no playbook playbook is what we call the tactical playbook. And the focus of the tactical playbook is about control and urgency. Now, I don't mean control necessarily in a negative sense. A lot of times playbooks are the documentation of the various processes, both front end and back end, to manage the sales process. And certainly that's necessary. But make no mistake about it, the tactical playbook doesn't drive those results. It's not used on an ongoing basis. It's more used to catalog the methodology that companies use. It's more of an operations manual than it is truly a playbook. The third type of playbook, which is the playbook we're talking about today, is what we refer to as the strategic playbook. And so the strategic sales playbook is focusing on solving for the problem, solving for the results that I talked about at the beginning of this program, right? It moves beyond mere documentation to result attainment. It's focused on how do we purposefully, predictably, repeatably, sustainably achieve objectives. How do we develop that repeatable stroke, that repeatable swing, if you will? And so if you think of the overall process of acquiring customers, you're going to see there's a series of executions that have to take place. Identifying your market, lead generation, lead management, conversion, sales. Those processes can't operate as silos. We have to have feedback loops built in so they're aligned together and they're optimized for the end result. That process needs to be built on a strong strategy. At the base of the strategy is things like, what's your economic model? What's the sales model? Where is your business in the life cycle? We're going to utilize technology, and technology is increasingly being used to help accelerate activities, efforts, and actions. All of that is built on a base of data and metrics. It's constantly giving us feedback, letting us know where we are, how are we doing, are we moving in the right place? The leverage point, the thing that brings strategy and enables it to be turned into execution, that's where playbooks fit. That's what playbooks are about. When you have this full model built out, that's what leads to predictable, repeatable, sustainable, and oftentimes explosive growth to occur. And to occur in a manner that's not overly crazy and not overly difficult, what we like to call effortless. Let's now take a look at the 7 key components of the playbook. In designing your playbook, where do you need to focus? So the first thing you have to do is you have to define the game that you're playing and the model that you're implementing. Think about it. If you're playing football, your playbook's going to look, you're going to have one playbook. If you're playing baseball, it's going to be a very, very different playbook. And if you're playing hockey, it's going to be different as well, not to mention basketball. You have to define the game, and you have to clearly communicate the game that's being played. Second thing you have to do is really define who's the market and who's the customer. Amazingly, probably the most commonly missed area of the playbook is the articulation of your story. I mean, don't get me wrong. A lot of playbooks have the features and the benefits, and maybe they even have talking points. But nowhere in the playbook is the actual story being communicated. The fourth area is documenting the sales process in an actionable way. Then documenting the plays that support the process. Articulating and identifying the metrics that are going to be used to assess progress. And then the operations processes that are going to be put in place to support the actions that are going to take place. Let's look at these each in a little bit more depth. What game are you playing? Here are 5 identifiable dials, if you will, 5 key points that differentiate very different types of games. Are you involved in a high consideration sale, longer sales cycle, risk involved in the purchase, not a high frequency of repurchasing? People need to think about it. Often multiple people are involved. Most B2B sales fall into the high consideration area. Versus low consideration. Where are we going to buy our paper clips? Low risk, not a lot of difference, doesn't take a lot of thought, typically a high repeat buying pattern. And again, you can see if you're involved in a high consideration sale, very different game than low consideration. Are you selling a product or a service? Are you selling a hybrid? For all of you SaaS companies out there, are you a product or are you a service? Where does that fit? Which game are you playing? Are you involved in a recurring revenue sale versus a non-recurring sale? If you're involved in a recurring revenue sale, Does all the revenue come up front? Is there a ramp up time? Is there a lag between acquiring the customer and the initial generation of revenue? All things that are going to impact the game that you're playing. Are you involved in a low margin, high volume sale versus a high margin, low volume sale? Is your average sale value $100,000 a year? Is it $3,000 a year? Are you operating at 80, 90, 100% gross margins? Are you operating at 10, 20, 30% gross margins? What market are you attacking? Are you a new disruptive offering looking still in that early adoption part of the curve? Are you in the mainstream, or is this more towards a laggard market? You'll see your business is going to fall somewhere on all 5 of these dials, right? And so if you're a high consideration, we're selling, $150,000 services with recurring revenue to mid-market and enterprise companies at the early end of the curve, we're going to have to design our process in a very specific way. We're going to have a very highly focused, highly developed sales effort. We're probably going to have some sales development, a lot of lead generation going on. That game is going to look one way versus we're selling a $3,000 project management tool that say recurring revenue again, but it's a lower margin, much higher volume sale, and it's project management. It is smack dab in the mainstream, maybe even on the laggard side. In that case, you're not even really going to sell your product. Selling it isn't the right thing to do. You're going to be looking to market your product. Different games are going to call for different types of playbooks, and you've got to make sure the playbook that you're designing supports the game that you're playing. The next thing you have to do is you have to define the customer, define your market, define the customer. Who are we looking to attract? Now, 2 mistakes happen here. When we think about the companies that we're looking to attract, too often companies, they define a type of company. We want to work with professional services companies that do $10 million to $500 million of revenue. Now, outside of the fact that that's extraordinarily broad, it doesn't mean anything. It still leaves open a great degree of interpretation for everybody, but more importantly, what it does is it brings an outsider's view. We're looking at the customer, at the profile from an outsider's perspective. If we want to unlock the genius of our sales team, if we want to be able to optimize the sales process, if we want to increase win rates and shorten sales cycle time, we've got to take the guessing and the ambiguity out of our definitions. We need to generate a clear and deep ideal client profile. Now, here's an example of an ideal client profile. It's actually part 1 of our ideal client profile. And what you'll see here is we look at a company from multiple perspectives, from who are we most focused on, what is our sweet spot, who are we built for, down to who can we benefit from, that would be the D column, and then what do companies that are clearly disqualified look like. Now you can imagine that we've got different plays, different components, different ways that we pursue companies in the A column versus the B column, C column, and D column. This takes a lot of guessing out of the equation and helps to ensure that our actions are aligned with what's happening outside of the sales function, and that the salespeople know who they're looking for, what needs to happen. Now, I want to share with you, this is part 1 of the ideal client profile. The second part of the ideal client profile that I don't have time to get into today, we actually wrote a biography for this profile. We describe the company as if it were a person. So we have a very clear perspective of what does it look like to be this company? What would we be thinking if we were in this company? This enables your salespeople to predictably develop empathy and connect with their customers. Always remember and never forget, companies don't buy things, people buy things. You have to define your buyer personas. Who are your primary personas, your secondary personas, and what negative personas exist. Dig deep. Your playbook needs to articulate what the customer thinks, feels, and sees. So you could bring a new hire on board, and within 15 days of training, they would be able to understand the typical life and perspective of our customer. And we have to go beyond just identifying and describing the customer. We also need to identify the journey that they go through when making decisions, all the way from not thinking about it one way or the other to making that final purchase decision. From a big picture standpoint, what we refer to as the epiphany, awareness, consideration, and decision stages. But what we also recommend is an effective playbook is going to break that down to more granular steps to actually describe what is happening in the epiphany phase, what creates the epiphany so that they become aware of the problem, what things are they doing in that awareness phase, so that we move to a more, what we refer to as the alpha journey, that really defines more of the actions. That then gets used to align messages, actions, activities, so that we can take the right action with the right person at the right time in the right way. If your ideal client profile and the game that you're playing aren't clear, it is highly unlikely that your playbook will meet the criteria to drive the types of results that we're looking for. There's going to be a misalignment in what happens. When those are clear, the next aspects of the playbook actually get a lot easier. So in this next section, we talk about the product and the story. This is where our features and benefits and product information goes. But what we have to remember, selling is all about storytelling. It's story time. If I can't look at your playbook and get excited by the story that you're telling, it's highly unlikely that your prospects are going to get excited by the story that your salespeople are telling. Develop the story clearly. That way, as it evolves and as people learn and pick up new things that work well, you're able to add it to the playbook quickly. That's what makes you agile. That's what keeps you in alignment. You need to generate and articulate clear messaging in the playbook, clear, powerful, and concise. What we refer to as point of view messaging. Point of view messaging connects to 5 components. It's got 5 components to it. The first thing is the message has to be about the prospect's world. It's about them. It's about their problems, their opportunities, not your solution. Features and benefits are about you. Point of view messaging is about them. The second thing is it challenges the prospect's thinking. What is the challenge that we're bringing to bear? How are we delivering a message so that people begin to think differently about it? And how does that message connect with an important issue that's already happening in your prospect's world? I can tell you from a prospecting and initial sales stage perspective, the most common mistake I see is salespeople work really, really hard to get a prospect to think about something that they're not currently thinking about. That is very, very expensive. That is very, very hard. And that is very, very low probability. We've got to figure out how to connect what we do to the things that they're already paying attention to. The first 3 points about your message are about them. The fourth point is it's got to play to your advantage. It's got to connect to you. And the fifth part of the message is the message isn't about why people should buy from you. The message should lead to an investigative or diagnostic sales process. That story, that point of view messaging is about why should you be thinking about this? Why should you consider this? Why should you dig deeper into this? Articulating that story and that messaging so that we gain consistency, so that everything continues to come from the same place, and therefore it aligns with your marketing material, your sales collateral, your website, the speeches that your executives make at conferences and so on, is crucial to get that benefit and unlock the potential that playbooks unlock. Let's talk about sales process now. too often we think of a sales process as just, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Maybe we say, here's a couple things that we do. Here's the fundamental problem with how sales processes and pipelines are managed. I always get a chuckle when I review somebody's CRM, because I look at their deal stages and I talk to the sales team and I'm like, well, why did you put this deal stage, why did you put this deal in this stage and that deal in that stage? And I'm going to tell you that the number one reason that a deal gets put in the stage that it's in has far more to do with the salesperson trying to manage their manager than it has to do with anything related to actual forecasting or insights and intelligence. And that's why most sales processes get ignored. That's why most salespeople behave in a lone wolf fashion. And that's why we can't get out of our own way with complexity and actually execute a predictable sales process. So here's what a sales process should look like. This is not the whole sales process, but it's a good bit. And I should tell you, this is a real sales process. There's no fiction here. We took this from a client who said we could use this. What you're going to see is in each stage, we're laying out what's the purpose of that stage? What's the objective? So we know why is that stage there? And if there's not a good purpose for it, then the stage shouldn't exist. Right. And you'll see that each purpose moves us closer to a positive decision, closer to a sale. One of the things that I see in pipelines all the time now is demo. I'm not saying demo should never be in a pipeline, but 9 times out of 10, demo is an action that you take. It's not actually a sales stage. So the first aspect for each stage, you've got to articulate the purpose. Then you articulate what are the actions that take place in that stage? What are the things that we should be doing? Right? This helps everybody know what's happening here. And by the way, this builds and extends to your marketing department. So they align their actions to support your actions at these various stages. And then here's the key. This is the kicker. There needs to be exit criteria. You do not have a real sales process if each stage you have in your pipeline does not have a defined set of exit criteria. And what that means is if I've got somebody in stage A, which is outreach, so we're just starting, for them to be in stage B, they have to agree to engage in a conversation. I can't say, yeah, I met him at a trade show and he didn't tell me not to call, so yeah, he's in stage B. Right? They have to agree. Rep when they move them to stage B is confirming they meet those criteria. Well, to get to stage C, they've got to meet the next set of criteria. And if they don't meet all 3 of these criteria, they are in stage B. Now, one of the things that happens is oftentimes you'll learn things about people and you'll see that they meet some of your criteria in stages that are down the path. Maybe they've defined the decision process, but you're still not talking to the right person. Right? So they're still in stage B, but I know what their decision process is. This helps to prevent a very common sales blunder, which is we have a tendency to identify the criteria furthest into the sales process, and we use that as the means to determine where they are, and we apply our sales strategy from that standpoint. When the reality is we've got to look at where are they the earliest so that we can make sure that we don't skip steps, so we can make sure that they don't skip steps. And that's what enables predictable outcomes to occur. And that's what enables you to learn and iterate and optimize. You begin to learn what are the criteria that matter. What are things that you missed? Hey, we thought we were going to win this deal. We didn't. What did we miss? Oh, wait, do we cover that in an exit criteria? Let's add that. What exit criteria are we finding really isn't material? Let's take it out. This is what keeps a sales process real. When the sales process is clear, now we move to frankly, the toughest part of the playbook. And I should say, this is the part of the playbook that truly never ends. And while it's the toughest part of the playbook, it's also the most freeing part of the playbook. And that's defining the plays. The reason that playbooks are so powerful is because the hard work and thinking that goes into developing them and to documenting them and to creating what I like to call the one source of truth that exists in that playbook is that we build the genius into the system. We do the hard thinking so that the hundreds of different scenarios that we see, if we were to look at each deal individually, we're able to narrow those down to archetypes, to patterns. And then we build the plays to guide the actions and maximize the probability of success. This is what plays are all about. And who better to talk about plays than the old, and I guess now new, coach of the Oakland Raiders, Chucky, John Gruden. And if you've ever seen John Gruden on ESPN, you've heard him, or on Sunday Night Football, you've heard him say something like, strong right, slot, Z right, spider 2, Y banana, Z over, on 3. Now, I don't really know what that means. Well, I know what it means now because I went on the web to figure out what exactly the play he called, and I got to see him explain exactly everything that happened. But do you wonder how a football team orchestrates complex plays in the 15 seconds they have from the point where they get into the huddle to where the ball is snapped? Well, each one of these things means something to different groups on the field. And so not only does each individual know what they're doing, but they also know what everyone else is doing. So let's break the play down and take it out of football and bring it into a more realistic, real sales situation like we deal with, I'm sure, every day. A play consists of identifying where's the focus, what's the campaign, or what is being utilized here, right? Where's the greater context? Who's the persona or personas? What funnel stage are they at? What variation, if any, is here? And what's the cadence? For example, early entry, tech stack, Victor VP, LQL, full press, 15 by 18. What in the world does that mean? Well, it means early entry. So we're trying to get the conversation started. We're at the beginning of the sales process. We're focused on a campaign that we call the tech stack assessment. So we're going to be implementing our tech stack campaign. This play is geared to Victor VP, who's one of our key personas, Victor Vice President of Sales. It's coming from our outbound list of qualified leads. So this is going to be an outbound play, not an inbound play. Full press. So for us, that means we're using every touch style in our early entry play. 15 by 18 is the cadence. We're going to have 15 touches over an 18-day period. What does that look like? Early entry, tech stack, Victor VP, LQL, full press, 15 by 18. Business day 1, email. Business day 2, voicemail. Business day 3, email. Business day 4, ghost call. So on. 18th business day. Breakup. At that point, we assess. Do we move to a target 250, which is a term that we use? Does it move to passive nurture? Right? So a rep knows where to go. And by the way, in our playbooks, if you click on each one of these, it's actually a link. So if I need to know what to do here, I click on it, it takes me there. This is one of the reasons we don't like paper systems. Let's look at another one. One that's maybe not as tight, not as clearly defined. Discovery focus, all MQL 7 by 1M. Okay, this is a discovery phase play. So that's where we are. It's our focus group, which has a meaning in our company. We have different groups that we refer to as focus or farm groups. This is focused on all personas that are MQLs. So it's our focus list, focus campaign, MQLs. 7 by 1M means we're in our 7 touch over 1 month campaign. So we're doing 7 touches every month for this person. Here's the play. What's the criteria that puts them into here? What's the cadence? What's happening? This drives those actions. Additionally, your plays, as you get deeper into the funnel, define what actions are taking place. Right? So when I'm in a conversation, this is an example of a deeper part of a play where someone has begun to talk to me about where their problem is, and it's telling me that, well, we're actually starting at symptoms. I need to trace that to problems and what are the causes of the problem, connect that to the implications and consequences. And in designing the solution, this is the process that I go to. It defines the sales toolkit, what sales tools are being used to support each one of these plays. Now, look, I'm not going to tell you that this is super duper easy to put together. It is the hardest part of the playbook. Now, the good news is you focus on your biggest, most important plays first. And it's kind of like on the marketing side, building out lead nurtures. Every play you build out becomes an asset. So you don't have to have every play at one day. But here's what I'm going to tell you. Where the benefit comes is, too often, the reason that salespeople get slowed down, the reason that the research says that salespeople, 50% are hitting quota, 50% aren't, and the latest research I saw said 36% of a salesperson's time is actually spent selling. I mean, that's horrible. The reason for it is that salespeople have to do so much admin work and thinking and figuring out to be able to take the action. Right? When you've defined what the play is, and you put the pieces together and the tools and the content to support that play, now the salesperson gets to execute. Right? We don't have to think. We don't have to slow down. Because we spend the time up front to figure out the complexity, we don't have to go through the figuring out every time it happens. That's why plays are so crucially important. The next piece of the playbook is metrics. You need to have a strong growth dashboard. The playbook needs to identify the key areas and metrics that you're focused on to give you a full 360-degree view of what's really happening with your sales efforts. Now, here is the biggest mistake that I see made constantly when it comes to developing metrics. When you think about the metrics, when you think about the things that you want to track, they're going to break into one of three areas. I call them efforts, outcomes, or results. Activities, causes, what happened. Right? Too often we focus on efforts or activities because they're very easy to measure, or we focus on results because they're both important and easy to measure. What is a lot harder to measure are outcomes. Outcomes are controllable factors. I don't have to have 100% control over it. But if you think about baseball as an example, as a hitter, I control my swing. I know if I have a good swing, I'm not guaranteed that I'm going to get a hit. But if I have a good swing over time, if I continue to have a good swing, I'll get better results. Golf. I don't control where the ball goes, but I do control my swing. And if I have a good swing, I'm more likely to get the ball where I want it to go. From a sales standpoint, outcomes are those controllable factors that cause results, what we call what causes sales. Now, they take more thinking. They're oftentimes harder to measure and harder to track, but that's where the leverage is. Track activities, they're important. We need to make sure that we're working hard. Track results, absolutely. We got to make sure sales close. We got to make sure we get revenue. But do not forget that results come from the outcomes. That's the influenceable, leverageable area that enables you to drive better results consistently and faster. The last piece of the sales playbook is all about the operations. Sales operations is all about backstage. I don't know of the people who are listening if anyone has seen a show like Hamilton, but I got to see Hamilton a few months ago on my birthday, and I was absolutely blown away, and I was taken away. And because I've studied this, what I realize is while the actors and the performers get all the applause and all the fame, what makes that show possible is the hundreds and thousands of activities that are taking place that nobody sees. That's what sales operations is about. It's your backstage. And let me tell you, if your backstage is not in order, your front stage won't be either. If your backstage isn't efficient, your salespeople won't be. If your backstage isn't effective, don't expect your salespeople to hit quota. The backstage creates the leverage, creates the consistency. Sales operations all about process development, process adoption, training, compliance, not in a negative sense of, hoarding over you, in the sense of, are we using this the way that we should be using it? It's about defining the back-end processes of what's happening. This is where your detailed cadences and actions and how do you enter things into the CRM, and what should be happening between the CRM and the marketing automation platform, and all those things need to be logged. And I got to tell you, because I've looked at hundreds of situations where we've looked at the CRM, we've looked at marketing automation, we see these rules set up or processes in place, and I ask the question, why is this set up like that? Why do we have this field? Why does this field have these choices? And the answer inevitably is, like 18 months ago, we had a situation. I don't remember quite what it is, but there was this thing, and we had to create a thing to be a thing, and so we figured out that thing would help this thing, right? And no one knows why they did what they did, and databases get heavy and ugly, and processes start fighting with each other, and automation starts causing explosions because we never documented what was happening and why it was happening, so that when we made other changes, we weren't fighting with each other, and systems weren't getting super heavy. That's where the operations part of the playbook, and why the operations part of the playbook is so important. So those are the 7 components of an effective playbook. And I think you'll agree with me that if you have those 7 points down, you're going to be in really good shape. But remember, I told you, a playbook's never done. Having a playbook is a third of the battle. Using a playbook is a third of the battle. Keeping the playbook relevant, that's the last third of the battle. What do you have to do to keep a playbook relevant? Well, as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, you've got to build it for use. A playbook has to be used. And that's why we highly recommend make the playbook interactive. Do not print it out. Save a tree. Build an interactive playbook. The playbook has to be iterative. If you haven't changed the playbook or added something to the playbook this quarter, and oftentimes this month, maybe even this week, people aren't going to pay attention to it. We have to be referring to it constantly. We got to be checking in on it. Hey, is this still working? How's that play going? Tracking the metrics to what's happening with those plays, reporting on the metrics, letting people see this is real. The playbook has to be used in coaching. I worked with a company, they had a playbook. It wasn't a great playbook. It wasn't a bad playbook. I monitored their coaching for 2 months. Guess what never got mentioned in any coaching session? The playbook. No wonder why it wasn't being used. And you need to have ongoing review cycles. You should have a service level agreement between sales and marketing. When you review your SLA, you should review the playbooks. Now, for those of you that are wondering, this sounds great, Doug, but do I need this? Do we need to focus on playbooks right now? Do I need to build a strategic playbook? Because Lord knows I got plenty to do. So here are 5 indicators that if any of these 5 things apply to you, it's probably a good indication that playbooks are part of the problem. If 2 of them apply to you, then yeah, you really should consider focusing on that. And I'm going to tell you, if 3 or more apply to them, playbooks needs to be at the top of the list, because you're probably not going to solve the problem until the playbook is defined or updated. So here are those indicators. Number 1, if you're seeing a lot of rep turnover, or you're going to be hiring a lot of new reps, it's time for a playbook checkup. If you're suffering from what my VP Sales Services, Ryan, likes to call lead constipation, you probably need to to look at the playbook. Now, you may be wondering what's lead constipation. Maybe the term explains it. Lead constipation is where we're generating leads. That might be inbound leads, that might be through other marketing channels, it might be our sales development team. We're seeing lead velocity, but it's not translating to sales momentum. And certainly it's not translating to revenue. They're not becoming true bona fide sales opportunities. That's lead constipation. And if you're suffering from that, it's time to look at your playbook. If your pipeline's bulging, lots of deals go in and the middle of the pipeline just gets fatter and fatter and fatter. And yeah, deals come out, but you're never sure why. And there's confusion in the middle of the pipeline. Reps say, oh yeah, this is going to close in the next 60 days. I mean, look at the predicted close date. And what I want to say, if more than 30% are past due, then you've got a pipeline bulging problem. But that would be unfair because there's probably less than 10% of pipelines that have that. If more than 50% of your deals are past close date, you probably have a playbook problem. If you're seeing higher sales costs or longer sales cycles, probably time to check that playbook. And last but not least, if you're not getting predictive results, you probably have a playbook problem. So if any of those things apply to you, it's a pretty good indicator that the playbook is a part and probably at the center of the problem. And if you address the playbook, it's a high leverage activity because it'll move you a long way to successfully executing the solution and sustaining it. If you're curious about how any of this applies to you, if you're curious about how you might be able to go about and build the type of strategic playbook that we're talking about, we'd be more than happy to talk to you. If we can help you, if you have any questions, if you want to take a look at your playbook, look at strategies to accelerate growth, don't hesitate to give us a call, send us an email. We're easy to find. Thank you and enjoy your growth journey. We've got a month and 10 days to end the first quarter strong. So go out and make it happen.